What happens when one of Hollywood's most private and beloved stars sits down for a seemingly straightforward interview and ends up revealing a secret that shakes her family to its core, live on air? What you're about to hear will stun you, because Elizabeth Olsen, known for her quiet grace and powerful performances, found herself unexpectedly confronting a truth that had been hidden for decades. This isn't just another celebrity interview where things go a little off script. This is a raw, emotional masterclass in how unspoken family histories can erupt, turning a casual conversation into an unforgettable moment of television. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment because you're going to want to discuss this shocking turn of events. The bustling set of Hollywood Confidential in Los Angeles was alive with its usual pre-show energy. Elizabeth Olsen had agreed to appear to discuss her latest critically acclaimed film, a decision that would inadvertently lead to the most revealing moment of her career. The stylists had perfected her look, the lighting was warm and inviting, and the studio audience was settled, completely unaware they were about to witness a seismic shift in celebrity interviews. As Elizabeth took her place on the plush, cream-colored sofa, she offered her signature warm, genuine smile that had charmed millions. She was wearing a chic, deep emerald green pantsuit that perfectly complemented her piercing blue eyes. Her hair was styled in soft, elegant waves, catching the studio lights just so. Everything seemed perfectly normal as the show's jazzy theme music faded and the cameras rolled. "Welcome back to Hollywood Confidential," announced host Marcus Thorne, with his usual charismatic flair. "We are absolutely thrilled to have the extraordinary Elizabeth Olsen with us today, who is just dazzling in her new role." "Elizabeth, thank you for being here," Marcus continued. "Thank you for having me, Marcus," Elizabeth replied, her voice soft but confident, a familiar tone that had resonated with audiences worldwide. "It's wonderful to be here." Marcus began with a few light-hearted questions about her film, her process, and her recent travels. Elizabeth answered thoughtfully, her enthusiasm for her work evident. Then, Marcus paused, a slight shift in his posture suggesting a more probing question was coming. "Elizabeth," Marcus began, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "your family, of course, is legendary in this industry. Your sisters, Mary-Kate and Ashley, are pioneers. But there's always been a bit of mystery surrounding your family's early days, especially before their fame. I've heard whispers, a few rumors, about a distant relative, perhaps an uncle or a great-aunt, who was also involved in Hollywood, but in a very different way. Can you shed any light on that?" The question hung in the air, unexpected. Elizabeth's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of surprise, then something else, recognition, perhaps even a hint of fear. But she quickly recomposed herself, though the shift in atmosphere was palpable in the studio. "Well, Marcus," Elizabeth responded, her voice a little softer, "my family's history is pretty well documented through my sisters. They started very young, and their story is truly remarkable." "Of course," Marcus pressed gently, leaning forward, his gaze unwavering. "But my research suggests there's a branch of your family tree that was, shall we say, written out of the official narrative. Someone named Elias Thorne? Any relation?" The studio fell silent. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath. Elizabeth's posture stiffened, and for the first time, viewers could see a genuine vulnerability behind her composed exterior. Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and Sunny Hostin, if they were watching, would have been on the edge of their seats. This was not the typical, fluff interview. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Marcus," Elizabeth said, her voice barely above a whisper, but with an underlying tension. "I'm implying, Elizabeth," Marcus continued, his voice calm but insistent, "that Elias Thorne was a blacklisted screenwriter during the McCarthy era, a relative of your mother's, who was essentially erased from Hollywood history, and from your family's public story." "Is that true?" The audience began to murmur, sensing the profound gravity of the moment. Elizabeth's eyes flashed with a mixture of shock and a growing sense of betrayal, but she maintained her composure, though it was clear she was fighting to control her emotions. "Marcus, I have to say I'm really surprised by this line of questioning," Elizabeth said, her voice gaining a slight tremor. "I came here to talk about my film, my art, my passion. I didn't come here to discuss private family matters or historical injustices. But perhaps the two are intertwined, Marcus shot back, his voice rising slightly. Perhaps the reason your family has been so private is because there are secrets they've chosen to keep. This is Hollywood Confidential. Elizabeth. We ask the real questions here. No, Marcus, that's enough, Elizabeth interrupted, her attention fixed on Marcus, her resolve hardening. Our audience deserves to hear the truth, yes, but not through veiled accusations and digging up painful pasts without context. What gives you the right to sit here and expose something so deeply personal, so potentially damaging, to my family without their consent? I'm not exposing, I'm just asking questions that I think people want to know about, Marcus said with feigned innocence. Your family has built an empire in the public eye, Elizabeth. Their history is fair game, especially when it involves significant figures like Elias Thorne. Fair game. Elizabeth's voice rose for the first time, echoing across the silent studio. Fair game, Marcus? You're being incredibly disrespectful right now. I've been nothing but open and gracious, and you've done nothing but ambush me with a deeply sensitive, potentially hurtful family secret. The studio was now buzzing with excitement and shock. The cameras were capturing every micro-expression of the unfolding drama. How dare you? Marcus said, rising slightly from his own chair, his face reddening with challenge. How dare you come on my show and accuse me of disrespect? You want to talk about secrets? Let's talk about why your family has kept Elias Thorne hidden for all these years. Was it shame? Was it fear of association with someone deemed un-American? The words hit Elizabeth like a physical blow. For a moment, she seemed stunned into silence. And then something changed in her expression. The initial hurt was replaced by a cold, steely determination, a fierce protectiveness that anyone who followed her work would recognize. This was the woman who embodied strength in her roles, who had carved her own path in an industry dominated by her famous siblings. You know what, Marcus? Elizabeth's voice was calm now, but there was a dangerous edge to it that made everyone in the studio lean forward. I've heard a lot of things about my family over the years. We've been called private. We've been called reclusive. But we have never ever been called ashamed of our lineage, especially not by someone who clearly has no understanding of the sacrifices and complexities of that era. The silence that followed Elizabeth's words was deafening. Marcus's face had gone from red to almost purple, and his hands were visibly clenching. The crew sat frozen, unsure of how to handle a situation that had spiraled completely out of control. Ashamed. Marcus's voice was a barely controlled whisper that somehow carried more menace than if he had been shouting. You want to talk about history? Let's talk about how your family benefited from the very system that crushed people like Elias Thorne. Let's talk about the privilege that allowed them to rise while others were silenced. The audience gasped audibly. Even for Hollywood Confidential, known for its probing interviews, this was beyond anything they had ever witnessed. Elizabeth's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, it looked like she might actually walk off the set right then and there. You know what, Marcus? Elizabeth's voice was ice-cold now. I've tried to be respectful. I've tried to take the high road, but you want to go there? Let's go there. You want to talk about privilege and benefiting from a system? Let's talk about how you've spent your entire career profiting from other people's pain and controversy. Let's talk about how you've never created anything meaningful in your life, only dissected the lives of others. How dare you? Marcus spat, stepping closer to Elizabeth. I've been in this business longer than you've been alive. I've earned my place here. Earned your place? Elizabeth laughed, but there was no humor in it. Earned your place by what? By being a sensationalist? By tearing down people who are actually out there creating, risking, and contributing art? By sitting behind this desk and throwing stones at those who build? Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a quick commercial break, a panicked voice announced over the loudspeaker, clearly the director. No, Elizabeth said, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. This needed to be said. I've sat here and listened to this man attack my family's history, my integrity, and my character, all for ratings. And for what? What did I do to deserve this kind of treatment? You exist, Elizabeth, Marcus said with venom. You exist as a symbol of Hollywood's carefully constructed narratives, narratives that erase the difficult truths. The studio erupted. The audience was on their feet, some shouting support for Elizabeth, others simply reveling in the spectacle. The cameramen were frantically adjusting their angles to capture every moment of the unprecedented confrontation. Truth. Elizabeth's voice rose above the chaos. Marcus, when was the last time you risked anything for truth? When was the last time you put yourself on the line and actually told a story that mattered, instead of just dissecting someone else's? You sit here every day and judge people who are actually living their lives, actually taking chances, actually making things happen. I don't have to justify my career to you. Marcus shot back. I've broken more stories than you've made films. Broken stories at what cost? Elizabeth demanded. At the cost of human dignity? At the cost of truth, when you twist it for your own gain. Because that's what you are, Marcus. You're a sensationalist who hides behind the guise of journalism, pretending that tearing other people down is somehow righteous. Marcus's face was now a mask of pure rage. You want to call me a sensationalist? Let's talk about the carefully curated image you've presented to the world, the quiet, humble sister. Let's talk about how you've used that image to avoid any real scrutiny. Carefully curated? Elizabeth laughed again. And this time, there was genuine amusement in it, tinged with a deep sadness. Marcus, you're literally having a meltdown right now. You're on national television having a complete emotional breakdown because a guest dared to question your intentions. I am not having a meltdown, Marcus screamed, proving Elizabeth's point perfectly. I am trying to conduct an interview and you're being difficult and evasive. Difficult and evasive? Elizabeth shook her head in disbelief. Marcus, you started this interview by ambushing me with a deeply personal and potentially painful family secret, without any warning. You've done everything possible to humiliate me and my family on national television. And now you're upset because I'm not just sitting here and taking it. A crew member attempted to approach the stage, likely to try and cut to commercial. No, Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp. We're not going to commercial. Elizabeth Olsen came on this show, and she's going to answer for her family's past. Answer for my family's past? Elizabeth's voice was incredulous. Marcus, you're the one who needs to answer for your behavior. You've been unprofessional. You've been disrespectful. And you've been cruel. And for what? What did I ever do to you? You represent everything that's wrong with Hollywood's illusions, Marcus said, his voice dripping with contempt. You're all carefully constructed narrative and no genuine truth. You're everything that's fake about this industry. The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Elizabeth stood perfectly still for a moment, and then something shifted in her expression. The anger was still there, but now it was joined by something else. Something that looked almost like pity. You know what, Marcus? Elizabeth's voice was calm again, but there was a finality to it that made everyone in the studio lean forward. I feel sorry for you. I really do. Because you're so consumed by finding scandal, so driven by negativity, that you can't see the real stories, the real struggles, the real triumphs that define people. I am not consumed by scandal, Marcus snarled. Trust me, there is nothing about your carefully constructed life that I envy. Then why are you so angry? Elizabeth asked quietly. Why are you so determined to tear down someone who came here in good faith? Why can't you just ask me about my work like a professional journalist? Because your work isn't the real story here, Marcus said, and the cruelty in his voice was unmistakable. Your work is a distraction from the hidden truths. Your work is manufactured, PR-driven content that contributes nothing to the world except more celebrity illusion. The audience gasped again, but this time, Elizabeth didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled. And it was a smile that carried decades of experience dealing with critics, with the relentless glare of fame, and with people who underestimated the quiet strength behind her gentle demeanor. You know what, Marcus? You're entitled to your opinion. You're entitled to criticize my films, question my choices, hate everything I've ever done publicly, she said, her voice clear and strong. But you're not entitled to be cruel. You're not entitled to be unprofessional. And you're certainly not entitled to ambush me with a painful family secret on national television. I'll say whatever I want, Marcus said, his voice rising again. This is my show. These are my questions. And if you don't like it, you can leave. The challenge was clear, and everyone in the studio held their breath. This was the moment of truth. Would Elizabeth Olsen back down, or would she stand her ground? Elizabeth looked around the studio, taking in the shocked faces of the crew, the wide-eyed audience, the cameras capturing every moment. Then she looked back at Marcus, and when she spoke, her voice carried a quiet dignity that made Marcus's ranting seem even more unhinged by comparison. You know what, Marcus? You're right. I can leave, she said, her voice steady. But before I do, I want to say something to your audience. She turned to face the cameras directly. I've been in this business for a long time, and I've faced a lot of scrutiny, she began. Some of it fair, some of it unfair. But I've never encountered anything quite like what I've experienced here today. Marcus tried to interrupt, but Elizabeth held up a hand. No, Marcus, you've had your say. Now it's my turn. To everyone watching, I want you to know that what you've witnessed here today isn't journalism. It isn't tough questioning, Elizabeth continued, her voice resonating with conviction. It's a personal attack disguised as an interview, an attempt to sensationalize and wound, and I won't be part of it anymore. The studio fell silent as Elizabeth picked up her clutch from beside the couch. But Marcus wasn't finished yet. Oh, no you don't. Marcus's voice cut through the silence like a knife. You don't get to come on my show, insult me, and then walk away acting like you're the victim here. Elizabeth stopped mid-step, her hands still on her clutch. The entire studio seemed to hold its breath as she slowly turned back to face Marcus. The look on her face was unlike anything anyone had ever seen from the usually composed superstar. Excuse me? Elizabeth's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more power than if she had been shouting. You heard me, Marcus said, emboldened by what he mistook for Elizabeth's hesitation. You came here with an attitude from the moment you sat down. You've been defensive. You've been rude. And now you're trying to make me look like the bad guy. The producers were frantically making cutting motions with their hands, trying to signal to Marcus to stop, but he was beyond reasoning with now. The confrontation had taken on a life of its own. Marcus, a stage manager's voice was heard, almost pleading. Maybe we should. No. Marcus interrupted again, his eyes blazing with fury. I'm tired of celebrities coming on this show thinking they can control the narrative. This is Hollywood Confidential, not some fluff entertainment show. We ask real questions here. Elizabeth slowly walked back toward the couch, but she didn't sit down. Instead, she stood directly in front of Marcus, and when she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. Marcus, I've been in this business for over 20 years. I've been interviewed by journalists from every major publication in the world, Elizabeth stated. I've been on talk shows, news programs, and award shows. I've faced tough questions about my career, my choices, even my family's privacy. But what you did here today wasn't journalism. It was cruelty. Cruelty? Marcus laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound. You want to talk about cruelty? Let's talk about how your family has, for decades, allowed a talented individual to be erased from their own story, simply because of political fear. Let's talk about how you've benefited from that erasure. Marcus, stop. Another crew member finally found their voice. This has gone too far. No, it hasn't gone far enough, Marcus said, rising from his chair again. This story of Elias Thorne deserves to be heard, and your family has suppressed it for too long. Elizabeth's composure finally cracked, not in anger, but in raw, profound emotion. Suppressed? Marcus, do you have any idea what my grandparents went through to protect their family during that time? She cried out, her voice thick with unshed tears. Do you have any idea what it's like to live with the knowledge that someone you loved, someone brilliant, was destroyed by a system designed to silence dissent? This isn't about shame. It's about deep, agonizing pain and the lengths families go to protect what's left. Oh, please, Marcus scoffed. Don't give me the victim speech. Your family has been privileged their entire career. Privileged? Elizabeth's voice rose, now tinged with a genuine sorrow. Marcus, my grandparents lost everything. Their dreams, their livelihood, their peace of mind. They built what they had from nothing, and they did it while living with a constant fear that their past, and their connection to Elias, would destroy them all again. And people like you, decades later, come along and sensationalize that pain for ratings. People like me? Marcus's voice was dangerous now. Now, what exactly do you mean by that? I mean people who excavate old wounds without understanding the scars, Elizabeth stated, her voice trembling but firm. People who think that exposing private suffering makes them courageous. People who have never put themselves on the line the way families do, every single day, to simply survive and protect each other. Marcus's face was now a mask of pure hatred. You want to talk about putting yourself on the line? Let's talk about how carefully you've crafted your own image. Never a controversial word, always the poised professional. Let's talk about how you've used that to avoid any real engagement with the world's complexities. The words hit Elizabeth like physical blows, but instead of backing down, she stepped closer to Marcus. You know what, Marcus? You're right. I have crafted an image of peace and professionalism, she admitted, her eyes unwavering. Because I choose to create, to inspire, to bring beauty into the world. At least I tried to build something positive. At least I didn't spend my career hiding behind a desk, playing it safe while tearing down people who are actually out there risking emotional exposure every single day. How dare you? Marcus hissed. I've been a voice of truth in this business for decades. Truth at what cost? Elizabeth demanded. Truth by inflicting pain? Truth by exploiting trauma? Marcus, look at yourself right now. Look at what you're doing. You're on national television having a complete breakdown because a guest dared to defend her family's unspoken history. I am not bullying anyone, Marcus screamed, completely losing control now. I am asking legitimate questions about your family's past and their choices. Legitimate questions? Elizabeth's voice was incredulous. Marcus, you ambushed me with deeply sensitive, unverified rumors. You've done everything possible to humiliate me and my family on national television. If that's not bullying, what is? The studio was in complete chaos now. The audience was on their feet, some shouting support for Elizabeth, others simply watching in stunned silence as the unprecedented confrontation unfolded. You know what? Marcus's voice cut through the noise. I'm done pretending to be polite. You want to know what I really think? I think your family has perpetuated a lie, a comfortable narrative to preserve their image, at the expense of a forgotten talent. I think you're all just a part of Hollywood's grand illusion. The studio fell silent. Even the audience seemed shocked by the viciousness of Marcus's words. Elizabeth stood perfectly still for a moment, and then something remarkable happened. Instead of responding with anger, she nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a profound sadness. Thank you, Marcus, she said quietly. Thank you. Marcus was confused by the response. Thank you for showing everyone exactly who you are. Thank you for proving my point about your brand of journalism, Elizabeth continued, her voice clear and strong. Thank you for demonstrating that you're not interested in truth or context, only in sensation and destruction. You're just a bitter man who gets his kicks from trying to tear down other people, especially when they refuse to conform to your narrow worldview. Marcus's face went white with rage. Get out, he said, his voice shaking. Get out of my studio right now. Your studio? Elizabeth laughed, a genuine, mirthless sound. Marcus, this isn't your studio. This is the network studio. You're just an employee here, just like everyone else. Security! Marcus screamed. Get security in here right now. Elizabeth held up her hand. Don't bother. I'm leaving on my own, she said, her voice unwavering. I'm leaving because I have too much respect for myself and for the truth to stay in a place where I'm being treated like this, and where a family's painful history is weaponized for entertainment. She turned to the cameras one final time. To everyone watching, I want you to remember what you saw here today, she said, her voice powerful and resonant. I want you to remember that standing up to those who seek to profit from pain is always the right thing to do, even when it's uncomfortable. I want you to remember that nobody has the right to try to destroy you or your family's story just because they can. Marcus made one last desperate attempt to maintain control. You're the one who's been destructive here. You're the one who's been difficult and unprofessional. Elizabeth turned back to him, and the look on her face was one of pure, profound pity. Marcus, I hope someday you find whatever it is you're looking for, she said, her voice gentle but firm. I hope someday you find a way to be happy without tearing other people down, without seeking to exploit their deepest vulnerabilities. But until then, I won't be part of your negativity, or your desperate need for sensationalism. She picked up her clutch and walked toward the exit, her head held high. But Marcus couldn't let it end there. Don't you dare walk away from me, he shouted. Don't you dare act like you're better than me. Elizabeth paused at the edge of the set and looked back one final time. I'm not better than you, Marcus, she said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. I'm just different. I choose to build stories, not tear them down. I choose to create art, not dissect lives. I choose to lift people up, not drag them through the mud. That's the difference between us. And with that, Elizabeth Olsen walked off the Hollywood Confidential set, leaving behind a studio in stunned silence and a host who had, in his rage, revealed himself to be everything he had accused her family of being, an exploiter of hidden truths, devoid of empathy. The cameras kept rolling as Marcus stood there, his face a mixture of rage and something that might have been dawning shame, finally understanding that he had gone too far. The audience was stunned into silence. The crew stood in shock, and somewhere in the control room, producers were probably having heart attacks. But Elizabeth Olsen walked out of that studio with her dignity intact, having shown the world exactly how to handle a manipulative and exploitative interview with grace, strength, and unshakable self-respect. So, there you have it. One of the most explosive and controversial confrontations in television history. What do you think? Did Elizabeth Olsen handle this situation the right way, or should she have walked away sooner? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this.